government to shut down. And so she's
Mr. President, thank you so much for sitting down with us today.
Great to be with you.
There's a lot that I want to ask you about the government shutdown and foreign policy, but I wanted to start with healthcare.
Yeah.
The signature element of your healthcare law went online this week, and the interest seems to have really exceeded expectations.
Right.
But there were some serious glitches with the online systems,
Right.
and our reporting shows that the number of people who actually managed to sign up for insurance in the states using the federal system was in the single digits. How many people have actually signed up for insurance this week?
Well, I don't have the numbers yet. What we know is that, as you indicated, the interest way exceeded expectations, and that's the good news. It shows that people really need and want affordable health care, and the product is a really good one. It turns out that choice and competition work. So what's happened is you've got private insurers who have bid to get into this system to offer affordable health care at significantly lower prices than anybody could buy in the individual market, because basically they're now part of a big group. And it is true that what's happened is the website got overwhelmed by the volume. And folks are working around the clock and have been systematically reducing the wait times. But we are confident that over the course of the 6 months, because it's important to remember people have 6 months to sign up, that we are going to probably exceed what anybody expected in terms of the amount of interest that people have.
Do you have a message for those Americans who tried to sign up this week and gave up in frustration?
Well, they definitely shouldn't give up. Typically what happens is when people are shopping for insurance, they visit a site or make phone calls or look at brochures 5, 6, 7 times before they make a final decision. And they're not going to have to pay premiums until December. The insurance doesn't start until January, so they'll have plenty of time. And my message to them would be, each day the wait times are reduced. Each day more and more people are signing up, and the product will save you money. People will save hundreds of dollars, in some cases thousands of dollars, as a consequence of being able to get health insurance that is priced for them and gives them the choices that they need. So the best example we have is actually Massachusetts, where they have a similar program. And what happened there is that the actual sign-up rate started fairly slowly, partly because people didn't want to pay 3 or 4 months ahead of when they would get insurance. But the interest, their ability to window shop, identify what's going to work for them, what suits their pocketbook, what kinds of tax credits they can get, that's already happening. And what we know is that for at least 60% of the people who visit that site, they're going to be able to get good quality health insurance for less than their cell phone or cable bill. And that is something that a lot of people understandably recognize is going to give them the kind of security they haven't had before.
The healthcare law is obviously very central to the government shutdown that's underway right now. Are you prepared, given that you're not going to make concessions on your healthcare law, as you've said repeatedly, are you prepared to have the government stay shut down up until the nation hits its debt ceiling in mid-October?
There's no reason that should happen. Julie, we can vote to open the government today. We know that there are enough members of the House of Representatives, Democrats and Republicans, who are prepared to vote to reopen the government today. The only thing that is keeping that from happening is Speaker Boehner has made a decision that he's going to hold out to see if he can get additional concessions from us. And what I've said to him is, we are happy to negotiate on anything. We are happy to talk about the healthcare law. We're happy to talk about the budget. We're happy to talk about deficit reduction. We're happy to talk about investments. But what we can't do is keep engaging in this sort of brinksmanship where a small faction of the Republican Party ends up forcing them into brinksmanship to see if they can somehow get more from negotiations by threatening to shut down the government or threatening America not paying its bills.
But do you now see those situations, the government shutdown and the debt ceiling, now merging together, given how close we are to the mid-October deadline that Secretary Lewis set?
Well, keep in mind, America has never not paid its bills. And I've said repeatedly that that's not something anybody should be threatening. The potential default of the United States, where we are essentially deadbeats. That's never happened.
But does that mean that if we get to the point where we're right before October 17th or whatever the day ends up being, that you would actually use some of these options that some of your allies say are available to you, like the 14th Amendment, to prevent a default?
Julie, I've said before, there's one way to make sure that America pays its bills, and that's for Congress to authorize the Secretary of the Treasury, Jack Lew, to pay bills that they have already accrued. Look, I think it's very important because the name of this is the debt ceiling, and so when people hear that, they automatically think, well, that must mean that somehow this is authorizing more spending and more debt for the United States. That's not what this is. What this is the ability for the United States government to pay for things that Congress has already committed us to paying for. And as a result, this has been a routine vote. It's happened more than 40 times since Ronald Reagan was president. Never before has a party threatened to not pay our bills except for 2011, the last time that Speaker Boehner and some of the same people in the House of Representatives thought that it might give them more leverage in negotiations. And we can't establish a pattern where one faction of one party that controls one chamber in one branch of government can basically hold its breath and say, unless we get 100% of our way, then we're going to let the entire economy collapse, the entire economy shut down. And so what I've said to them is this: making sure that the United States government pays its bills, that's non-negotiable. That's what families all around the country do. If I buy a car and I decide not to pay my car note 1 month, I'm not saving money, I'm just a deadbeat. Well, this is the exact same situation.
But if they don't, if they get up to this deadline and they are not willing to pass this clean debt ceiling that you're asking them to do, would you be willing to take other action to prevent a default?
I don't expect to get there. There were at least some quotes yesterday that Speaker Boehner is willing to make sure that we don't default. And just as is true with the government shutdown, there are enough votes in the House of Representatives to make sure that the government reopens today. And I'm pretty willing to bet that there are enough votes in the House of Representatives right now to make sure that the United States doesn't end up being a deadbeat. The only thing that's preventing that from happening is Speaker Boehner calling the vote. And I think most Americans, when they think about how our government's supposed to work, they say to themselves, each member of Congress has their conscience. They're supposed to represent their constituents back home. And if, in fact, there's a majority of the members of the House of Representatives who are prepared to move forward so that families can get back to work, so that people who are, whether it's veterans or children or small businesses who are getting services from the federal government can start getting those services again, I think most people would say, if there are the votes to do it, let's go ahead and do it. And then we've got a whole bunch of things that we've got to have a serious conversation about. We should be having a conversation not just about debt and deficits. We should be also having a conversation about how are we making sure that young people are getting a great education. How we rebuild our infrastructure and put people back to work. How are we going to make sure that we fix a broken immigration system? How are we going to do all the things that we need to grow the economy and make sure that we are building a strong middle class and providing ladders for opportunity for people to get into the middle class if they're willing to work hard?
Well, the Tea Party has really stood in the way of a lot of those objectives that you're seeking. Do you think the Tea Party has been good or bad for America?
Well, I don't want to paint anybody with a broad brush. And I think one of the great things about our democracy is that we've always had a whole bunch of different regional attitudes and philosophies about government and ideologies, and the Tea Party is just the latest expression of probably some very real fears and anxieties on the part of certain Americans, and I get that. So there's nothing objectionable to having strong principled positions on issues, even if I completely disagree with many of their positions. But there are certain rules to make sure that everybody is participating, everybody's respected, the process moves forward in an orderly way, and we don't create chaos. So my concern has less to do with the Tea Party per se or the particular positions that they take on issues, but rather it's this idea that if they don't get 100% of their way, they'll shut down the government or they'll threaten economic chaos. That has to stop.
Some of these Tea Party senators are in their first term, and you were a first-term senator who came in and had a lot of public attention around you. You didn't sort of take the traditional route. You weren't a backbencher.
Right.
I'm wondering if you feel like you set a precedent for people like Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, Rand Paul to come in their first term and really take a high-profile role in the Senate.
Well, if you recall, when I came to the Senate, my attitude was I should just keep a pretty low profile in the Senate and just do the work.
Media certainly didn't let you do that.
The media may not have, but I didn't go around courting the media, and I certainly didn't go around trying to shut down the government. And so, I recognize that in today's media age, being controversial, taking controversial positions, rallying the most extreme parts of your base, whether it's left or right, is a lot of times the fastest way to get attention or raise money. But it's not good for government. It's not good for the people we're supposed to be serving. And one thing I just have to remind members of Congress about is these are real folks that are being impacted. I've got staff here who may be expecting their first child, and right now they're not sure about whether or not they're going to be able to meet expenses. I've got young staff who, if have a car accident, they may have a $1,000 premium on their car insurance or a deductible on their car insurance, and if they don't get a paycheck, they may be broke. They will not be able to pay the bills. I'm getting letters every single day from farmers who have been waiting to buy some land, and now they may not get a loan. And from small businesses, we give $1 billion worth of small business loans every single month. Those loans are not being processed. So this is something that is concretely affecting real people. There is no reason government should be shut down. I think it's very important for the public to understand that a bill passed the Senate, democratically controlled Senate, that set budget levels at the levels that Republicans prefer, not Democrats. I mean, essentially what's happened here is Democrats are saying they are prepared to pass a Republican budget for 2 months while negotiations continue. We just can't have a whole bunch of other extraneous stuff in it, and the obsession with the Affordable Care Act, with Obamacare, has to stop. That is not something that should be a price for keeping the government open.
I want to switch to foreign policy. You've swapped letters with Iranian President Hassan Rouhani. You've talked to him on the phone now. You've had an opportunity to listen to him give several speeches and interviews.
Right.
I know you've said he needs to back up these words with actions, but I'm wondering if you just have a gut feeling at this point on whether he really represents a different type of Iranian leadership.
Well, here's what we know. He was not necessarily the preferred candidate of some of the ruling clerics when he initially threw his hat into the ring. He won pretty decisively. So what we know is that in the Iranian population, at least, there is a genuine interest in moving in a new direction. Their economy has been crippled by international sanctions that were put in place because Iran had not been following international guidelines and had behaved in ways that made a lot of people feel they were pursuing a nuclear weapon. I think Rouhani has staked his position on the idea that he can improve relations with the rest of the world. And so far, he's been saying a lot of the right things. And the question now is, can he follow through? The way the Iranian system works, he's not the only decision maker. He's not even the ultimate decision maker. But if, in fact, he is able to present a credible plan that says Iran is pursuing peaceful nuclear energy, but we're not pursuing nuclear weapons, and we are willing to be part of a internationally verified structure so that all other countries in the world know they are not pursuing nuclear weapons, then in fact they can improve relations, improve their economy, and we should test that.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said this week that Iran is about 6 months away from being able to produce a nuclear weapon. You said in March, before your trip to Israel, that you thought Iran was a year or more away. What's the U.S. intelligence assessment at this point on that timetable?
Our assessment continues to be a year or more away, and in fact, actually, our estimate is probably more conservative than the estimates of Israeli intelligence services. So, we share a lot of intelligence with Israelis. I think Prime Minister Netanyahu, understandably, is very skeptical about Iran, given the threats that they've made repeatedly against Israel, given the aid that they've given to organizations like Hezbollah and Hamas that have fired rockets into Israel. If I were the Prime Minister of Israel, I'd be very wary as well of any kind of talk from the Iranians. But what I've said to Prime Minister Netanyahu is that the entire point of us setting up sanctions and putting pressure on the Iranian economy was to bring them to the table in a serious way to see if we can resolve this issue diplomatically. And we've got to test that. We're not going to take a bad deal. We are going to make sure that we verify any agreement that we might strike. But it is very much in not only the United States' interest, but also Israel's interest to see if we can resolve this without some sort of military conflict. And so we now have the time to have those serious conversations, and we'll be able to measure how serious the Iranians are.
You have a decision coming up on troop levels in Afghanistan. Have you made a decision yet on how many U.S. troops you'd like to see in Afghanistan after 2014? And are you comfortable with a scenario that would leave no American troops there after the end of next year?
Well, first of all, I'm glad you brought this up, because given what's been happening in Syria and Egypt and Iran, I think sometimes we haven't seen enough reminders in the news that we still have tens of thousands of American troops on mission in Afghanistan, making enormous sacrifices, and there's still folks who are getting killed and getting hurt and doing incredibly courageous work. We are going to end combat operations in Afghanistan at the end of 2014. What I've said is that if, in fact, the Afghan government is interested and willing to work with us in a cooperative way that protects our troops and other coalition partners, we would consider a train and advise mission that would extend beyond 2014, greatly reduced from what we're doing now. We have not yet signed what's called a bilateral security agreement that would make sure that if in fact American troops were on Afghan soil, that they were fully protected. And we still have some time to discuss this. We're in discussions with the Afghan government and President Karzai. But no matter what, by the end of next year, we'll be finished with combat operations.
Are you comfortable, though, with this, what's become known as the zero option at the end of 2014?
Well, I think that it is in both the interest of the Afghans and the United States that we are in a position to continue to help their military consolidate security in their country. We have helped them ramp up so that they now have a fighting force that is increasingly effective, increasingly well equipped. My preference would be that they can manage security on their own and that we don't see a return of Al-Qaeda or any other terrorist organization operating on Afghan soil. And they're getting there. They're not quite there yet. So if in fact we can get an agreement that makes sure that U.S. troops are protected, make sure that we can operate in a way that is good for our national security, then I'll certainly consider that. If we can't, we will continue to make sure that all the gains we've made in going after Al-Qaeda, we accomplish even if we don't have any U.S. military on Afghan soil.
If I could just ask you one last question on something that's not politically related, but is getting a lot of attention in Washington, the name of the Washington Redskins football team. There's a lot of people who say it's time to change the name of that team, considering that it's insulting to many Native Americans. What's your position on that?
You know, Julie, obviously people get pretty attached to team names, mascots. You know, I don't think there are any Redskins fans that mean offense. I've got to say, if I were the owner of the team and I knew that there was a name of my team, even if it had a storied history that was offending a sizable group of people, I'd think about changing it. But I don't want to detract from the wonderful Redskins fans that are here. They love their team, and rightly so, even though they've been having a pretty tough time this year. But I think all these mascots and team names related to Native Americans feel pretty strongly about it. And I don't know whether our attachment to a particular name should override the real legitimate concerns that people have about these things. But I don't have a stake in this in the sense that I'm not a part owner of any football team. Maybe after I leave
the presidency.
Maybe after I leave the presidency, I think it'd be a lot of fun. Although I'd probably look at a basketball team before I look at a football team. I know more about basketball than I do about football.
Get the Bulls ready.
Absolutely. I think they're going to be good this year.
Thank you very much for sitting down with us today.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate it.
Great to talk to you, Joe.
You too.
Good.
Of Washington with this shutdown. Federal employees are dedicated public servants who are just trying to do their jobs, support their families, and contribute to the economy. They did not ask to be furloughed, and they had no time to plan financially for this crisis brought on by the stubbornness of the Republican Party. It seems to me that by supporting this bill, we are not trying to give them a paid vacation. If my colleagues on the other side of the aisle would bring a clean CR to the floor, they could all be back at work on Monday. These families are victims of the dysfunction of this Congress.
Is expired. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Ohio.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Fernvold.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of this bill to guarantee our federal workers are paid. You know, they shouldn't be the innocent pawns in the middle of a debate caused by us unable to work with the Senate. You know, we're ready to talk, we're ready, willing, and able to talk, but we need to ratchet down the rhetoric a little bit, make sure our employees get paid, make sure they get taken care of, and make sure that the men and women who work in places in my district, or district I represent, like the Naval Air Station Corpus Christi, like Padre Island National Seashore,